So in this video, I feel like talking about the concept of non-self, known as anatta in Pali or anatman in Sanskrit, and also the idea of the true nature of the self or the true self, as we also see in some Mahayana sutras, and why these concepts are actually not contradictory, but rather the true self also means the non-self. So the true self means non-self, non-attachment, and non-separation. So the Buddha actually used the word self differently in different contexts, and they're actually referring to different things. So when we talk about non-self, what the Buddha is really saying that there is no personal egoistic self. Any attachment to any sort of personal self or to the ego identity is going to lead to suffering. Why is that? Because all this is impermanent. If we are attached to what is impermanent, then we're going to suffer when things change. So that is why the Buddha says the non-self. However, in Mahayana sutras, the Buddha also talks about the true nature of the self, which the Buddha is really referring to this universal oneness in all things. That is our Buddha nature, and also that is the emptiness. Okay, let's first look at the concept of non-self. So why does the Buddha talk about non-self? Why the Buddha says one should not be attached to any notion of the self, the personal self, the ego self. So in Buddhism, we also talk about the 5 skandhas known as the 5 aggregates, which are the material and mental factors that take part in the rise of craving. So for instance, the first one is the form and phenomena. We could be attached to the form. So we could be attached to our names, our identities, our bodies, our careers, our possessions, and so on and so forth. But are we really any of this? Are we really our names? I've already had a few names in my life. I had my Chinese name, I had my English name, I had my spiritual name, now my Dharma name. So our names can change at any point of our life. So even our names are illusions, and it's emptiness in nature. And we also can't be attached to our bodies and physical appearances because they are also changing all the time. How we grew up from little babies, and then we'll all grow old one day. We may be attached to our possessions. Our possessions could also lose in any moment, and we are definitely not going to bring them with us after our life here is finished. So all this, we call them illusions in Buddhism due to the impermanent nature. So in Buddhism, what is called truth is this unchanged, permanent nature. Then we can call it truth. If it's impermanent, it's short-lived, it can change in any moment, and we call it false, and we call it an illusion. And this is also the same with our feelings, our volatile emotions, our perceptions to things, our mental formations, all the mental constructs, all the stories that we made up to tell ourselves. And even consciousness is still an illusion, as we have discussed in our previous videos. All our judgments, our attachment, our separations, so everything, all this can change just in any moment. So they're not permanent in nature, and that is why we call them illusions. But because we are identified with these illusions and mistake them as the truth, and that is what brings us suffering. So that is why the Buddha said, if you really examined all this, there really isn't any sort of a permanent personal self. If we look into all this, none of them is permanent. That is why they're not the true nature of the self. So then what is the true nature of the self? In Mahayana Buddhism, we can also find the Buddha sometimes use the word the true self or the true nature of the self, which really refers to the Buddha nature, or otherwise also known as the emptiness. So when one is free from all attachment, all separation, when one is also free from all the volitions of the mind, then one obtains this true nature of the self. So if we speak in the language of consciousness, then that is when our alaya consciousness has been transformed into this mirror-like wisdom. When one simply just treats everything as it is, that is the emptiness, the thusness, the suchness of the reality, and that is the true nature of the mind, the true nature of the self, the true nature of the heart, the Buddha nature, the Tathagata. So all these are actually mean the same thing. The reason why the Buddha used so many words to describe the same thing. It's exactly to help us not to be attached to mere words. So know that all words, speeches used by the Buddha are simply a way of convenience to help us uncover the true nature of the mind, to point to our Buddha nature, to point to this underlying, unchanged, permanent truth that is within all of us. So if we remember the famous picture, the samsaric wheel, outside of this wheel of life stands the Buddha with his finger pointing at the moon. So the moon represents our Buddha nature, this luminous, the pure, unchanged Buddha nature. So one must not be attached to the fingers, right? The fingers are just like the suture, the words. Rather, one shall really see the moon to try to understand the Buddha nature, the emptiness, and know that even all the so-called illusions, the nature of the illusions is also emptiness. It is not away from emptiness. So a metaphor I used before is, imagine this great peaceful ocean, which is our all-encompassing Buddha nature and emptiness. And there are waves on the ocean, so the waves are like illusions. But even the nature of the waves is no different from the nature of the ocean, because it is also water in essence. So the nature of the waves is also the same as the ocean. It's also the water or the emptiness. The waves are also belong to the ocean. Without the ocean being there in the first place, the waves would not even be there. That is why it is not two. The nature is one, it's emptiness. So truth is non-dual, emptiness is non-dual. It is as it is. So our Buddha nature has in fact never left us, even when we are so much drowned in our desires, craving, attachment, and illusions. Our Buddha nature is always here. It is as it is. So if there is anything that is true and permanent, unchanged, that exists in all things and all beings, it would be emptiness, our Buddha nature. But if we really become awakened to this Buddha nature, we will not even be attached to the concept of the true nature of the self, because the true nature of the self has no attachment. It is just as it is. This is not an easy concept to understand. The truth is indeed ineffable. One has to experience to know. All talks are simply ways of convenience to point us to see the truth. Namo Amitabha Buddha. Namo Amitofo.